of Beth Araba, and the border went up to the stone of Bohan, the son of Reuben. And the border went up toward Debir from the valley of Achor, and so northward, looking toward Gilgal, that is, before the going up to Adumim, which is on the south side of the river, and the border passed toward the waters of En-Shemesh, and the goings out thereof were at En-Rogel. And the border went up by the valley of the son of Hinnom unto the south side of the Jebusite, the same as Jerusalem. And the border went up to the top of the mountain that lieth before to the valley of Hinnom westward, which is at the end of the valley of the giants northward. And the border was drawn from the top of the hill unto the fountain of the water of Nephtoah, and went out to the cities of Mount Ephron. And the border was drawn to Bala, which is Kirjath-jearim. And the border compassed from Bala westward unto Mount Seir, and passed along unto the side of Mount Jearim, which is Chesalon, on the north side, and went down to Beth-Shemesh, and passed on to Timnah. And the border went out unto the south of Ekron northward, and the border was drawn to Shikron, and passed along to Mount Bala, and went unto Jabneel. And the goings out of the border were at the sea, and the west border was to the great sea, and the coast thereof. This is the coast of the children of Judah, round about according to their families. And I'll bet a third of those are probably correct. To be fair, no one really knows. Even Hebrew scholars can look at things like this and guess, because if y'all remember, we talked about the Hebrew language before. The original Hebrew has no vowels at all. It's a whole bunch of consonants. We went through after the fact and started putting dots and dashes and all sorts of stuff on the top and the bottom of the letters, and we worked out pronunciations on ancient Hebrew. So I'm doing what I can, but even the guys who come up here and say, no, this is how you pronounce it, we don't have audio recordings from that time. They have no idea how to pronounce it. And just like we say things today that would probably be pronounced completely different 100 years ago, well, that's been a couple thousand years. So don't let anybody ever tell you you're mispronouncing something that you read in the Bible, because they don't have any idea. All right? Well, there we go. I put on a good show. Don't peer too deep. So again, we're going to be summarizing a lot of what we read in these chapters here. It's a larger lesson to take away from sections like this. It's that there are times when the work of God is domestic and tedious. It's not all slaying giants or facing lions or giving speeches to large aggressive assemblies or shouting down Romans or anything. I've been to enough church board meetings in my life to know that they're not always fun. Some are even boring, but the work of building the kingdom varies in type and method, and thank God it does, because we're not all good at doing the same things. Body has hands and feet and eyes, and each excel at different tasks, and the eyes don't look at the hands don't look at the head and say, I'm an eye, and why aren't you, and back and forth. We don't fight like that. God's gifted us in different ways. So what we have here is the casting of lots. And the casting of lots was not so much so flippant as one guy like me up here with a spinning basket calling out bingo numbers or something like that. It wasn't a small process. This was a solemn process. It was conducted with much prayer. It was taken very seriously. And it's one in which faith was placed in this process, as evidenced by we have unchangeable outcomes from the drawing of lots here, from this land distribution. No land was increased, no land was decreased, it wasn't bartered, it wasn't bought and sold. After all of this, these were where the children of Israel had their homes, their lands, their territories. And we don't really know what the process for doing this really looked like. We don't have any idea if it was, they laid out a giant map and it was dice or they looked and said, hey, this, drew it all out and pointed to one and then just picked a tribe name from a bag or something. No idea what they did. At some point it does use the word, the lot fell, and the word that they specifically use for fell in Hebrew means to physically fall out of. They may have been dumping a bucket or something like that, or actually had names in something in a bag and dipping it out or tipping it out to find something. But again, we don't know, and they don't go through it, and it doesn't really matter. Whatever that process looked like, the very first lot went to the tribe of Judah. And Judah and Joseph were the two sons of Jacob, on whom Reuben's forfeited birthright fell. It devolved. Y'all remember what happened with Reuben? Way back when, he committed a wicked act with one of his father's concubines. And when his father found out, he said, guess what? I know you're the oldest. No more. So he lost his birthright. He lost his preeminence, more or less, among the other children of Jacob. And the double portion that he would have taken, because Judah gets the preeminence. He gets the dominant status within the family after that. But the double portion goes to Joseph. Why? Because Joseph was the firstborn of Jacob's favored wife. He considered him his true firstborn because he had Rachel and he had Leah. Leah and Rachel. Yeah. All right. Was it Rebecca? No. It was Rachel. Yeah, I know. All right. Rachel, the one that he actually liked. Leah was the one that they swapped out on him. And she kept having children because she was unfavored by Jacob, and God recognized it. And so they got into the children wars back and forth, trying to gain Jacob's favor by having children. And at long last, when Rachel had a child, it was Joseph, and that became his favorite, and that's the one that got the amazing Technicolor dream coat. And that's the one that he favored above all the others because he deep down considered that one his truly firstborn. The Bible says you're not supposed to do that. The Bible talked about it, I believe it was in Numbers, I can't remember, I think it was in Numbers when it said if you got two wives, you treat your firstborn actually as your firstborn. It doesn't matter if you've got another wife. So the first 12 verses, as we have read here, are geographic descriptions of where the boundaries of the lands of Judah extend. It's a lot of names. Most of those places don't exist today. Some of them we think we have a good idea where they might have been. And you probably all have in the back of your Bible some kind of map that shows this. I found a map, a colored one as best I could, of the allotments of the tribe of Israel. And that's honestly, that's the only slide that we had for tonight. But most every Bible I've ever seen has a map somewhere of the tribes of Israel in the back of it. Verses 13 through 20. And unto Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he gave a part among the children of Judah, according to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, even the city of Arba, the father of Anak, which city is Hebron. And Caleb drove thence the three sons of Anak, Sheshai, and Ahman, and Talmai, the children of Anak. And he went up thence to the inhabitants of Debir, and the name Debir before was Kirjathsepher. And Caleb said, he that smiteth Kirjathsepher and taketh it to him will I give Achsah, my daughter, to wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, took it, and he gave him Achsah, his daughter, to wife. And it came to pass, as she came unto him, that she moved him to ask of her father a field. And she lighted off her ass, and Caleb said unto her, What wouldest thou? Who answered, Give me a blessing. For thou hast given me a southland, give me also springs of water. And he gave her the upper springs and the nether springs. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Judah according to their families. I wondering if I had a map. I'm sure I do. Yeah, look at that. 12 tribes of Canaan. This passage is inserted here because Caleb, you remember Caleb is the one that asserted himself first before the lot distribution began. He came forth and he said, you know what, I was of the spies that ventured southward into the land of Canaan, into that southern part of Canaan, and I brought back the grapes, and I said that we can do this, and I was one of only two, and everybody else said no, and those 10 guys died, and then everybody else, we had that whole falling out in 40 years in the wilderness, but this land was promised to be by Moses. That was Caleb. Caleb is of the tribe of Judah, and it shows that he did in fact receive the land that was promised to him. And not only that, but by God, just as we talked about last time, he successfully drove out the children of Anak, some of who were probably big old boys, as those were the forefathers of Goliath, That had the city of Gath was within that territory, and that's where Goliath was from, and it keeps referring to the Anakians as giants of the land. In the process of this conquest, Caleb singled out a place called Debir, also known as Kirjath Sepher. And he announced to his army that anybody who takes this place for me can have my daughter as a wife. So while he's driving out all of the giants and he's routing everybody to take over his portion of the land that was promised to him, he says, listen, here's a stronghold over here. This is a good opportunity for somebody to prove themselves. I've got my wife, and as long as she's willing to it, because they did have a lot of say on it, he said, I'll give her as a wife to anybody who can actually take that city for me. And who steps up? It is Othniel, the son of Kenaz. Kenaz was Caleb's younger brother, so Othniel is Caleb's nephew. Othniel was a brave man, he was a righteous man, and God eventually, this is not the last time we hear about Othniel, God eventually raises him up to be one of the first judges of the Israelites. In Judges chapter 3, verses 8 through 10, it says, Then the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Aram-Naharaim. And the Israelites served him 8 years. But when the Israelites cried out to the Lord, he raised up Othniel, son of Caleb's younger brother Kenaz, as a deliverer to save them. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he became Israel's judge and went out to war. And the Lord delivered Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Aram, into the hands of Othniel, who prevailed against him. So this is where we first hear about him, already showing a little bit of bravery. He says, yeah, I'll go take that stronghold. She's a pretty girl, and this sounds like a good opportunity. Gets himself a wife out of the deal, a little bit of notoriety, and then continues to lead a righteous life enough that God raises him up at some point to be the leader of the Israelites within the militaristic campaign against the king of Aram. And as Aksa, that's the wife, as she was moving in from her father's Caleb's house into her husband Othniel's house, she either persuaded Othniel to ask him, or to at the very least give her permission to ask Caleb. She wanted a field. She wanted a special place to call their own, something that had springs, because most of the land in the south that they had been given was dry and rocky. It was foothills. It was mountainous, where all these giant, hard-nosed people, mountain men, were living. She said, no, that's great. It's wonderful that we have all this. Please ask him if we can get something with a little bit of water, because I want flocks and herds and everything. And he gave it to her. 2 fields, even by the sound of it. He gave her 2 fields with springs, one presumably flowing down into the other there and feeding the other. Verses 21 through 63. Buckle up. You want to? I feel like I should do verbal exercises for like unique New York over and over, because man. And the uttermost cities of the tribe of the children of Judah toward the coast of Edom southward were Kabzeel and Eder and Jagur and Kinnah and Dimona and Adadah and Kadesh and Hazor and Ithnan, Ziph and Telem and Bealoth and Hazor, Hadadah, Kerioth and Hezron, which is Hazor, Amam and Shema and Molada and Hazargada and Heshmon and Bethpele and Hazar-Shual and Beersheba and Bizjothjah, Bela and Lim and Azam and Eltolad and Chasil and Hormah and Ziklag and Madmana and Sansana and Leboath and Shilhim and Ain and Rimmon. All the cities are 29 with their villages. And in the valley Eshtaol, and Zorah, and Ashna, and Zanoah, and Enganim, Tapua, and Enem, Jarmuth, and Adullam, Soko, and Azekah, and Sharaim, and Aditham, and Gedera, and Gederothaim, 14 cities with their villages. Zenon, Hadasha, and Migdalgad, and Dilian, and Mezpah, and Joktheel, and Lashish, and Bozkath, and Eglon, and Kaban, and Laman, and Kithlish, and Gedereth, Beth Dagon, Nama, and Makkedah, 16 cities with their villages. Libnah and Ether and Ashan and Jiphthah and Ashna and Nezib and Kala and Achzib and Marishah, 9 cities with their villages, Ekron with her towns and her villages. From Ekron even unto the sea, all that lay near Ashdod with their villages, Ashdod with her towns and her villages, Gaza with her towns and her villages, unto the river of Egypt and the great sea and the border thereof. Almost there. And in the mountains, Shamir and Jatir and Soko and Dana and Kirjath-Sanath, which is Debir, and Anab, and Eshtemoth, and Anim, and Goshen, and Holon, and Gilo, 11 cities with their villages, Arab, and Duma, and Eshian, and Janum, and Beth-Tapua, and Aphekah, and Humta, Kirjath Arba, which is Hebron, and Zior, 9 cities with their villages, Maon, Carmel, and Ziph, and Judah, and Jezreel, and Jokdeam, and Zanoah, Cain, Gibeah, and Timnah, 10 cities with their villages, Halhul, Bethzur, and Gedor, and Marath, and Bethanoath, and Eltekon, 6 cities with their villages, Kirjath Baal, which is Kirjath Jearim, and Rabbah, 2 cities with their villages in the wilderness, Betharabah, Middin, Sekaka, and Nibshan, and the city of Salt, and Engedi, 6 cities with their villages. As for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the children of Judah could not drive them out, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Judah at Jerusalem unto this day. Oh, there. Do not clap for that. Yeah, but I mean, we've got Côte d'Ivory, Stratford upon Avon. We've got we have super weird city names in Texas in some places. Some of them are long.
Carmel is a normal word.
Well, some of them will have meaning, some of them not. It's yes, though. Yes, but I mean, we have every bit some of the weird names that they have too. But some of them do seem a little long. But just like Abraham was called out of Ur of the Chaldees. Well, what country are we in? The United States of America. Looking at that 1,000 years from now, people might be like, well, that's a long, super long name. Well, it means something. It's not just, none of it's arbitrary. So this is the list of cities in all the land that was given to the tribe of Judah. Verses 21 through 62 contains about 120 names of different cities and towns, all within those borders. Now, I say about 120 names because some of them, like you'll see, it stops and it says in like verse 32, all the cities are 20 and 9 with their villages. Well, if you go prior to that and actually count those, there's 32 names listed there. So some of those that are given, they count as cities, and some of them they just count as like suburbs or villages. They want to list the name, but it's not formally a city. So all of the names together is about 120 different names. The chapter closes then with a mention in verse 63 of the failure of Judah to drive out the Jebusite people. As for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, which Jerusalem you will also see called Jebus in some places, the children of Judah could not drive them out, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Judah at Jerusalem unto this day. So Jerusalem was taken in part by Joshua before this. But there's an upper part that's stronger and then a lower part that's more easily accessible. The upper part's called Zion then. Now that was still held by the Jebusites even until David's time. And it's probable that the Jebusites there descended from there to the lower town, Jerusalem, and took it, maybe even back. And the Israelites were obliged to win it a second time, maybe even a third time, back and forth, because they never would take that upper stronghold of the Jebusites there. 2 Samuel, I didn't write the chapter. I just have verses 5 through 6. Somewhere in 2 Samuel. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, which spake unto David, saying, Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither, thinking David cannot come in hither. These people were still holed up in their stronghold in 2 Samuel, when King David is going to Jerusalem. So the big question that I had, that y'all probably have as well, why? Why on earth were they not able to conquer the Jebusites? Because it says there, as for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the children of Judah could not drive them out. Well, we've seen God raining hellfire from the sky, stopping the sun and the moon, smashing the walls of Jericho, drying up the Jordan so that they could cross over the thing. Surely it's within God's power to take these people. The only explanation therefore the best explanation that I could come up with, because the only one I can even fathom here is it is some lack of faith on the part of the Israelites here. The same kind of lack of faith when Caleb went into the southern part of Canaan and said, yeah, we can do this, and everybody else said no, and it angered God so much that he turned them all south and said, all right, we're going back to the wilderness for another 40 years. They could have taken it at that point, but their lack of faith prevented that thing from God's will. It's hard to not compare this to, we're just a chapter away from Caleb loudly claiming that with God, he will drive out the giants. Well, what would be different here? If God is with them, who's going to be able to stand against them? But you see in the New Testament, in Mark 6, when Christ goes to his hometown, he could do there no mighty work. That was because of a lack of faith. Christ marveled at their unbelief. He did not want the will of God to play out within that place in the presence of such a lack of belief. Now we see that here among the people. They had military defeat because they had set aside their faith in God. There were cracks in it somehow. And it's still hard for me to comprehend after seeing and doing everything that they had seen and done, not walking right up to Zion, to the upper part of Jerusalem, and just knocking on the door and expecting it to disintegrate into ash and just march right through the thing. They still somehow have their doubts about God being on their side, and may well have tried to take this in their own militaristic strength. And we've seen God steer them away from that over and over and over. This is not you who will be doing this, it is me. And he does things so that they know that God is on their side. And when the most recently, when they had they fought all of that giant group of kings, and I think there were like 20 kings that we had a couple chapters ago. After that, they had defeated the kings. They had horses. They had chariots. They would have been tempted to add them to their army. This will really make a stir among the people out there. And God says, no, you don't need to make a stir with your horses and chariots. I'm making a stir for you. My presence came into the land of Canaan long before y'all had ever hit the Jordan and decided to come over here. I was here striking fear into the people, and that's why he told them, burn the chariots and cripple the horses there. Y'all aren't going to need them for war because you have me. So I don't know what other explanation there could be. The Israelites had disfavor from God in this expedition because they lacked faith. They didn't believe God would do what he said. They were relying on their own strength, and because of it, they did not receive at that time the full extent of their promised reward, and the Jebusites were a thorn in their side for a long, long time. And they're not alone either. They're not the only ones who end up leaving alone some of the people in Canaan here. And that's what gets interesting as we start reading through this. Now, chapter 16. This chapter, and we're not going to read every word of this chapter. I know you're probably tired of hearing me do that. A little verbal gymnastics. This chapter talks about the second lot of the Israelites, which fell to the tribe of Joseph. So if y'all have been looking at your little map, if y'all have looked at that in your Bible or anything, we have Judah is the southern part. There's a carve out in the middle of Judah. That's for Simeon. That happens in a little bit here, but Judah gets the whole southern part of the land of Canaan. Now we're looking at the tribe of Joseph. And what's special about the tribe of Joseph? It's two half-tribes. They don't refer to it as tribe of Joseph. It's the tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim, and together they are the tribe of Joseph. But they keep referring to it as the half-tribe of Manasseh and the half-tribe of Ephraim. So again, after Reuben forfeited his birthright with his wicked act, and the preeminence of the firstborn fell to Judah, the double portion fell to Joseph, the firstborn of Jacob's favored wife. The only difference here is that the tribe of Joseph is broken down into, again, two tribes. So they get a really big portion of Canaan together. Some of it falls east of the Jordan because Manasseh, y'all remember that Gad and the Reubenites worked out a deal whenever they were east of the Jordan. They said, this is great land for herds and flocks, and we've got herds and flocks. We'll go fight with you but we want this land. And Moses said, all right, yeah, that's fine. You can do that here. And so Gad and Reuben, and then that whole chapter talks about them talking things out with Moses. And then at the very end of it, almost as a throwaway line, it says, and so the land east of the Jordan was promised to Gad and Reuben and to the half-tribe of Manasseh. So somewhere in that chapter, Manasseh was in the conversation. He was in the dialogue back and forth with them. They're just not specifically listed. But when you see on the map there, you'll see Manasseh has land east of the Jordan, east of the Sea of Galilee. Now together, they get a really big portion of the land that is distributed here. They border each other on the west side. Manasseh has some on the east side. They border each other on the west side. And then not only that, but in verse 9 of chapter 16, it says, the separate cities for the children of Ephraim were among the inheritance of the children of Manasseh, all the cities with their villages. They had a bit of overlap between them. There were cities assigned to each other, laying within the other's territory. They had been bound together. And all of these, dwelling so closely together like this, they all have a bit of community about them. But Manasseh and Ephraim specifically shared cities back and forth. Then in verse 10, we see another instance where the Israelites obey God 9/10 of the way and then stop short of total obedience. The same thing that we looked at in the very last chapter here. They drave not out the Canaanites that dwelt in Gezer, but the Canaanites dwell among the Ephraimites unto this day and serve under tribute. Gill's commentary says this, in this they did not obey the command of God. Neither they did not drive them out because they could not, God not delivering them up into their hands because of their sins or through their slothfulness, or it may be through covetousness, being willing to make some advantage to themselves by them being a trading people. So that commentary is saying, either it was sin or lack of faith. Sin is what got the Israelites at Ai. Lack of faith is what gets the Israelites everywhere else. Or maybe they were just an enterprising group of people and said, why would we drive this last little vestige of people out when we can make them work and pay tribute up to us? We could actually profit off of this, and we'll just obey God 9/10 of the way there. We're not told why anytime we see that. And again, that's not the last time we're going to see that. There are other tribes that start getting into their lands, and they don't drive out all of the Canaanites there. We're not told why. So you'll have to wrestle with that on your own. Chapter 17. This chapter talks about Manasseh. Last one was Ephraim. This one talks about Manasseh. The descendants of Machir received their inheritance on the east of Jordan. The descendants of Gilead on the west side, along with the Ephraim. The rest of the children of Manasseh were divided into 6 families. So when they're actually distributing the lots, they're doing it by family here. One of those families was Zelophehad, which was listed in verse 3. It says, but Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, had no sons but daughters, and these are the names of his daughters, Mahlah and Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Y'all remember that? Those women approached him, approached Moses, and they were saying, hey, our father died in the wilderness without any sons, and we don't want his name to die, and we feel like we should have land because all the other men are going to get land, and we should have some kind of accommodation when it comes that time. This is what that's talking about. The daughters came forth, and they were given land. They had special consideration given in the distribution of land. So that was back in Numbers 27, verse 3. Our father died in the wilderness. He was not in the company of them that gathered themselves together against the Lord in the company of Korah, but died on his own sin and had no sons. So Korah's rebellion, y'all remember that? The earth opened up, swallowed all of these people that had come together in a rebellion against Moses. Well, those daughters come up there to Moses and Eleazar, the high priest, and they say, our father had no part in that. Our hands are clean. That wasn't us. Oh, did you see what happened over there? Man, I kid. Those people. Wasn't us, though. We'd like some land. And that's about how that conversation went. Verses 11 through 13. And Manasseh had in Issachar and in Asher Bethshean and her towns, and Ibleam and her towns, and the inhabitants of Dor and her towns, the inhabitants of Endor and her towns, and the inhabitants of Tanakh and her towns, the inhabitants of Megiddo and her towns, even 3 countries. Yet the children of Manasseh could not drive out the inhabitants of those cities, but the Canaanites would dwell in that land. Yet it came to pass when the children of Israel were waxen strong that they put the Canaanites to tribute, but did not utterly drive them out. So again, for whatever reason, we're not told, the Israelites failed to execute God's will and God's judgment on a portion of the inhabitants of the land. They were unable to drive them out. Now, this one gives you an extra little bit of flavor there, because it says that they returned when they were waxen strong. When the tribe itself had increased in number and grown a little stronger, they came back to the people that they were unable to kick out the first. So this one, it sounds like they, without consulting God or seeing what God's will or trying to get any kind of military strategy from God and how he would have them go about this, they went after these people in their own strength, did a completely military expedition on their own. Knowing that, it's God's will if these people are here, but not really seeking God's will in how to do it. And we know that because they don't try it again until they feel like, well, now we really have the numbers to go back and do it. Now, they don't go back and do it and drive the people out. They didn't utterly drive them out. They go back and they made them tributaries. They more or less made them servants. It's not full-on enslavement. They're allowed to stay in their cities, but they go in there and they set up some kind of a leader that's loyal to the Israelites. They might have to kill a few people to drive the point home, but from now on, every month or every however often, you're paying tribute to us for us allowing you to stay in this land. So that's very similar to what the last chapter saw. They went in and they made tributes out of the people there. Verses 14 through 18. And the children of Joseph spake unto Joshua, saying, What hast thou given me but one lot and one portion to inherit, seeing I am a great people, for as much as the Lord hath blessed me hitherto? And Joshua answered them, If thou be a great people, then get thee up to the wood country, and cut down for thyself there in the land of the Perizzites and of the giants, if Mount Ephraim be too narrow for thee. And the children of Joseph said, The hill is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites that dwell in the land of the valley have chariots of iron, both they who are of Bethshean and her towns, and they who are of the valley of Jezreel. And Joshua spake unto the house of the Joseph, even unto Ephraim and to Manasseh, saying, Thou art a great people, and hast great power. Thou shalt not have one lot only, but the mountain shall be thine, for it is a wood, and thou shalt cut it down, and the outgoings of it shall be thine, for thou shalt drive out the Canaanites, though they have iron chariots, and though they be strong. What this is, and I know it's some fancy language for what's going on here, this is a debate between Joshua and the twin tribes of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, bear in mind, Joshua is of the tribe of Joseph. So they're his people, and they probably thought he might be a little more sympathetic to their plea here, but they go up to him and they say, Listen, we're huge. We're 2 tribes. We're not just 1 tribe. We shouldn't get just 1 lot of land. We deserve more than that. And true enough, in the last census, in Numbers, we had 2 censuses, one at the very beginning of Numbers and one at the end. In the second census, Manasseh was 52,700. Ephraim was quoted as 32,500. So together they had 85,200 people. That is more than any of the other tribes. The next highest one, I think, was like 79,000 or something. So, they've got a lot of people, and they maybe need a little bit more land. But how does Joshua reply? He says, All right, you're a great people, no doubt. You want another lot of land? Go get it. There is a lot of woodland right there in the mountain area that you've got. You've plenty of room. You just go north. You take that mountain, get rid of the giants there. Shouldn't be too hard for a numerous and mighty people like you. Go on up there and take your second lot. And they push back and they say, Man, I don't even think we'd make it to the mountain. The Canaanites in the valley have chariots of iron. Give us another lot. And Joshua doesn't relent. He says, No. You've got 2 lots if you've got the grit to take it. You are big enough. You are strong. You're mighty by your own words. Yes, you are. this land is yours. You can occupy it if you go up there and take it. And apparently that shut him up, because that's where the chapter ends. So ultimately, what we have so far in the distribution of land, and I don't know if y'all have the little map there, we have Judah in the south, really big portion in the south in the land of Canaan. Then we have Manasseh, has a good-sized portion on the east side of Jordan. Manasseh has a good-sized portion on the west side of Jordan. We have Ephraim tied to Manasseh right there as well, and they share a bunch of cities. That's most of the promised land. The three biggest chunks have been given away here now. They have been designated by lot. So the three biggest contingencies have already been distributed. Now everybody that goes forward is going to get a lot that's going to be filling in the gaps here and there within the promised land. But the three biggest ones, and not the biggest by number, mind you. Yes, Joseph together is the biggest by number, but Judah's not. So looking at Manasseh and Ephraim separately, but these are the ones that God, because they didn't come out and assert themselves as such in saying, like, I am the tribe of Joseph, I have the right to go second. Presumably there were lots cast for who was going to go second, even within this lottery. Yeah, I know. Thank you, Marcia. Somebody. But God, by his divine providence, took the firstborn that had preeminence after Reuben's falling out, and then the actual firstborn that deserved the double portion, and took care of them first, because again, lots is not random. We think of it as random. Lots is not random. Lots, as it was given to these people, as it was prescribed by God, was a legitimate way for God to communicate his will to these people. So it should be no surprise that in the Hebrew mind, these two people had the most preeminence, and God saw fit to sign them by lot. Very first thing, right out of the gate, they get the land. So everything else is going to be all of the Reuben and Asher and everybody else. They're all going to fall in little bits all over here, and some of them a little more crammed than the other people, a little more densely populated, but that's how we're on here. So again, that's 3 chapters. It's dry, but there's enough flavor in there that it's definitely worth it.
Shout out to Renee, who is watching, listening to you right now do the word aerobics from Yuma, Arizona.
Yuma, Arizona. See, Yuma, that's a weird name. Yeah, it's short. Hey, everybody say, hey, Renee. There we go. And Michael. I don't know if Michael's one. Hey, Michael.
Michael's in bed. He plays with
That's all right. All righty, that's all I got tonight.